correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Greetings and Smurf toppings.
And before we get into any topic this week, we need to talk about our podcast of the week, which is...
It is the OP Cast.
The OP Cast. That's it. That is Chaz's new project.
Yep, it's Chaz. I think Josh Heath from Werewolf the Podcast is also involved.
I believe so.
But they're talking about the, what do you want to say, Trinity, Aberrant, and Aeon, I believe, were the three, like the trilogy of games put out by White Wolf et al. Back in the day.
Yeah.
In that whole kind of sphere. And so, yeah, that is exactly what it's about. Their most recent episode, as we record, was talking about the first edition Aberrant Supplement Year 1. And, yeah, they've been talking about, it looks like a variety of the books for those, Aberrant. I guess Trinity Continuum maybe is the name of the whole thing. But, yeah, different books for that. And just, cool stuff that way. So if you're into that stuff, check that out. Again, that's called the OP Cast. And hey, you can find it at anchor.fm/OPcast.
Very cool.
So,
yeah. Definitely check that out.
Mm-hmm. Along with, if you're just looking for other stuff on the network, go to d20radio.com, I believe it's called, or search D20 Radio. You'll find a podcast tab, the blog, all the fun stuff, links to the network Discord, all kinds of fun and gaming goodness. And maybe some more info about Gamer Nation Con, which I still haven't gotten the updates as far as where you can go to buy whatever tickets remain that didn't sell on the Kickstarter because, well, GM Chris hasn't answered me yet, but that's his fault. But we will update links, etc., in the show notes as we get that information. So that's that.
Yeah. Well, so as many of you know, we've had a tense couple weeks here.
Mm-hmm. Also,
not necessarily.
For us, we're recording this episode out of order. So.
Right. So we're recording this before the interview. So that's going to be something.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get into some heavy stuff. And look, let's be honest. We're not a news podcast, but this OGL debacle, and that's all I'm going to call it, has the whole industry in a tizzy, and we've got a guest lined up.
Yeah, it's got the industry. It's got the people. It's got everybody in a tizzy, but I really found it, and Steve knows this. I took a step away. I had to walk away from all discussion of it for a little while because I just could not handle it. But to get a little break from that and the probably deeper conversations than we're going to have tonight that you'll hear, before this, we're going to talk about fun stories and goofy gaming moments because. Mm-hmm. We need a little bit of levity.
Yeah. And look, that's, half the fun, right? It's just those zany moments that happen for no apparent reason. And, there's also comedy games too, right?
Right. Yeah.
Monster of the Week, which you all will be hearing shortly if we haven't started it already, because my brain cannot figure out the time warp that is podcasting right now.
Right.
That got a little kooky and zany.
RetroStar was very kooky and zany.
Yeah. And sometimes that feels really, really good.
Yeah, it's a nice break from the seriousness. I it goes to this gaming is in and of itself an escape, an escape from reality. You want to go pretend something else is something else, right? We want to be characters, we want to escape from reality a little bit, and I think comedy gaming holds a very important place in that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's not comedy gaming. Sometimes it's maybe not as serious tone gaming. It's it's not always that it has to be a goofy, silly game to get a goofy, silly story. You could have very serious games that silly things happen in and go back and laugh at.
Mm-hmm. Well, I got one, and this is sort of a peripheral story, I guess. So way back, oh geez, it was like episode 16 or something. I told the story of the night that Papa went crazy.
Right.
So there's a follow-up story to that I don't know that I've ever shared on this podcast. So for those of you who haven't gone back and listened to the story, the night that Bubba went crazy was the night that my Riffs group in college decided to self-inflict a TPK on themselves, which actually they all had a blast. Anyway, so fast forward a couple weeks, everyone's got their new characters. They're kind of all fitting in together. One of the people playing with us was my roommate. And for some reason, he had to leave the session early. And so he, does whatever he did, leaves the session early. So he comes back, and another friend of mine who was playing in the game was just hanging out in the dorm room with me. We're just, shooting a breeze, whatever. So my roommate walks in and goes, "What happened?" Well, this other friend looks up at him without skipping a beat and goes, "We all died." And see, I had set up this thing, and it was like this hook, line, and sinker thing. It was actually out of one of the supplements that had come out recently for that. And it was basically this kind of, I don't know, anyway, this kind of vision thing about some big bad monster thing, whatever. Well, someone had been playing a Jedi, yes, a Jedi. Anyway, so like I said, none of this was planned, but this other friend of ours looks at my roommate, goes, "We all died. The Jedi messed around with the big monster thing and it killed us all." So this is not at all rehearsed, right? But like, just for giggles, I went with it. So, we fed him a little bit more or whatever. And of course, this other friend is kind of acting indignant about it, right? And then I think the next week we were off, but I managed to get a hold of everyone that my roommate would run into who was part of the group and let them know, the joke. So my roommate had gone through and actually made another character, which, requires like 2 hours of time in that engine. We sit down to play, and he had handed me his character sheet when he left early. So we sit down to play. He has his new character sheet. I just open my folder and I hand him his old character sheet. He's like, "Huh, what?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that was all a joke." Which, everyone that was in on it thought it was hilarious, and Dan thought it was pretty funny too.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah. I'm trying to think. I tried to induce a TPK on a party and it completely failed.
Okay.
I set up a trap room, and the reason I did this is because I had 2 new players that wanted to join, and everybody else at the table, we had a conversation at one point like, "Oh yeah, if you guys happen to party wipe, are you okay with that?" And they're all like, "Yeah, we could make new characters. That's not a huge deal." So I set up a trap room, sort of not hoping, but had a hunch that they weren't going to be able to figure it out. And at the pit, at the bottom, was supposed to be a pit full of skeletons. They fought and swung and fought every single skeleton out of that pit and then climbed out and walked away. And I'm sitting there with 2 new players going, "Sorry." And I laughed like hard. I'm like, "You guys, like, they were, I don't even know, like 4th level at best." So the skeletons really should have given them a fight, but the dice were just on their side and they completely wiped the entire room. And I'm sitting there with 2 new players like, "I'm sorry. You watched this. You saw what happened. I understand if you don't want to play at the table anymore."
But like sometimes too, I think like what was it? A few years ago now, when I did my Home Alone D&D one shot.
Mm-hmm.
That was, look, we all went into it knowing it was going to be, and I didn't tell you guys right off the bat it was going to be Home Alone, and though it didn't take much to figure it out.
No.
But like, and there were things in that too that like, because I remember you had a wand of polymorph or something.
Yeah.
And I made you make a hit roll with it, and you're like, somebody was like, "Well, that's not how that works." I'm like, "Oh, just make it, like it's
Make
a ray."
roll. Yeah, right.
And of course, like, because look, it's zany, it's whatever. And so like you're trying to but somehow you ended up polymorphing a spider into a donkey.
Yeah.
And then it got shot with an arrow. So no one ever actually saw it as a donkey.
Right. It was all smoke. We just didn't see anything.
But then you were just like Arrow holding a spider to the wall or something.
Right. He pinned the spider to the wall. It was great. That was good. It was good. Because I made it like really big to help with the hit percentage. Because all it takes to knock off a polymorph is 1 HP of damage.
Right. And so, like I said, it was, and I forget that. Well, that was where I made up my own variant of these splitting kobolds.
Yeah, you did.
Because it was that and a mimic.
That was a good one.
Actually, the unintentional funny moment in that though was, remember when the one person got there late?
Yeah.
And you had just bought a mimic.
Right.
And I'm like, this person showed up late for the session. We hadn't known they were necessarily
Really
coming.
Yeah.
So it's like, well, how can I introduce them? Oh, what the heck? They just appear in the wardrobe.
Right. They're just stuck in there.
This has completely slipped my mind. You just finished fighting a mimic. Now the wardrobe starts making noise.
Right. Exactly. We're like, oh God, not another one. Oh, it's those stories though, man. I don't know. It's never the ones that like you intentionally planned. It's always the ones that just sort of organically happen.
Yeah. And like, I think comedy games, and now like, this is something I actually want to try this at some point. I want to try like action movie world and intentionally do like a campy 80s action movie.
Yeah.
Because some of those had beautiful, I'm sure they were intentional, but they seemed like they weren't intentional comedy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
I know what you're saying.
Like, I think for me, like, I think Demolition Man was kind of the start of the action comedy, at least.
Well, I've said for a long time, I want to run a Demolition Man game. I just haven't figured out quite the right system to run it in yet. Because I think Cyberpunk's good, but Cyberpunk's a little too deadly. I need a little less deadly and a lot more action packed, and I'm starting to think maybe PBTA.
Yeah, well, I think that's what action movie world is. But yeah, you get those moments that just sort of happen, be it
you're talking about Demolition Man. My favorite scene in Demolition Man is when they're down in the sewers. Stallone just looks at her and goes, "Do you see any cows down here?"
Yeah.
Like, it's just this throwaway. It's a throwaway line.
Yeah.
Oh man.
But like, yeah, I think there is a fine line with comedy games where it becomes a trying to one up each other in comedy, and sometimes that gets out of hand.
Sometimes, but I think with the right comedy game, I think when that gets out of hand is when it's a non-comedy game doing comedy. I think with a well-crafted comedy game, you have the situation where the one-upsmanship just sort of it becomes like, if you can mechanically use that and sort of use that as a way to even it progress the story in a weird way.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can disguise that like going crazier stuff. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that I always laugh at is like I'm a big, well, not huge, but I'm a big Monty Python Flying Circus fan.
Mm-hmm.
I and this is blasphemy, but I like the movies, the Monty Python movies, but I think Flying Circus has better skits and is like funnier in a different way.
No, I think I think you have a point. Let's put it that way. But continue.
Yeah. So anytime that one-upsmanship continues on, I fall back on Monty Python tropes of just continue it on until it's become too much, and then just straight up say that it's too much, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is far too silly. Move along.
No, but I think you're onto something though, in that in the Flying Circus, they were skits.
Right.
They could turn it up to 11 and then stop.
Right.
Where with the movies, as good as they are, they had to stretch it out.
And some of those go on a little bit too long.
Yeah.
It whereas something like the Dead Parrot sketch is funny, right? If that was in one of the movies, it would have been like 5 to 10 minutes of the Dead Parrot sketch.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, where that's only a handful of minutes, it could have, if it was in one of the movies, that sketch is way too long. Like, all of the bits that, and I know this is blasphemous to the Monty Python fans, but all of the bits that I find funny from the movies are usually the short little throwaways.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think one of my favorite skits is Bicycle Repairman.
That's a good one.
But actually, I think one of my, what do you want to say, favorite at the table comedy moments, or maybe I should say scenarios, and you and I have, I don't want to say perfected this, but used this to great effect in campaigns that we were otherwise not enjoying, is in character giving each other shit.
Oh, in character banter is the best. Is the best. When you're sitting there and you are just giving it to the other characters, and in good fun. Nothing
Right.
ever mean, but just it's always, this is what gets me. It's always when you're doing it during combat or while something quote unquote important is happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, that's what makes like the Expendables enjoyable, is their chemistry, like everybody's chemistry with each other.
Yeah. Well, I think, comedy is a weird thing. It really is. Because, like, okay, if I'm going to point at a comedy game that I thought was just amazing, we've talked about them, they're on the network. The Staggering Dragons G.I. Joe actual play is comedy gold. I mean, from character design to some of the shenanigans that were going on at the table that you don't find out about till like 3/4 of the way through the recording. How the players were switching characters on the GM. I mean, that was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. But, and then at the same time, I think one of my favorite comedy games written is a 200-word RPG. And I'll set you up so you can edit me here. You can censor me, right?
Beep.
Yeah. It's Dracula, which was the 2018 finalist, which tells you how long ago that was. I played that at a table. I sat down, I went to a friend's house, and he's like, "Hey, come over, hang out. We're playing games, whatever." So we're chilling, and he's like, "We're gonna play some D&D," and then like half of the group didn't show up, and I'm like, "I have this," and he's like, "Okay, well, let's play it. Can we play it with like 5 people?" I'm like, "Yeah, we can play it with 3 people. We can play it with 2 people, right? Like, you could theoretically play the game by yourself." So we're sitting there, and it's just going crazier and crazier and crazier, because it's just this 200-word RPG that is just nuts. And I look over at my friend, and he is like barely able to catch his breath, dying of laughter, falling on the floor, and just crying, laughing so hard because of, I have 3 theater kids in a room playing this game that is all about you describing what's happening. They're just dying. And that's one of my favorites. And I think that game it shows comedy doesn't have to be complex. This game is hilarious for its simplicity, right? Like,
Oh, think about the shenanigans you could get up to with like Honey Heist.
oh, Honey Heist, or yeah, just any of them. There's a ton of those like super, super, super light games.
Mm-hmm. I think maybe those. Well, but I think too, though, sometimes it's those moments that maybe are funny to the characters, or to the players, but not necessarily actually funny in the game.
Well, yeah. Yeah, I think
Those third person funny, if you will.
the outside world stuff that can be a different beast, right? Like, that could make a serious moment funny, that could make a funny moment serious. Outside world stuff can really change how a game is perceived.
Mm-hmm. And I had an idea about, or remembered something funny that happened while we were talking about this before we started recording, and now I can't freaking remember what it was. Well, okay,
Yeah.
here's one.
Okay.
This is more players thought it was funny, and it's a bit murder hobo-y, but this was actually the first D&D game I ever played in. It was Dark Sun campaign, and the character I was playing was a mule gladiator. So mules were, I believe they're half dwarf, half human, but let's just basically say Dave Bautista.
Mm-hmm.
As Drax. That's pretty much your description of the character. So we somehow end up in this tavern, and my guy's big, muscle bound, and he carried a claymore because I mean, why wouldn't you? You're 6'6". Well, somehow this batch of, we'll call them drunken sailors, lines up in a semicircle around our table where he's kind of standing at the end. Well, you can kind of fill in the blanks, but somehow also after his initial turn around and swing at shoulder level for him, a grease spell got cast.
Oh, gee.
So now there's just a tangle on the floor.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, well, are there a pair of ankles near me? And the DM kind of looks at me like, huh? Like, so yeah, a pair of ankles, like preferably that belong to the same body. Like, okay. So okay. So I grabbed the ankles, and one of the things that he was the gladiator class, and they had, this was back in the days of weapon proficiency, they had weapon proficiency improvised weapon. So I picked up this drunken sailor and started using him as a club.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which then, after the fight wound down and there were a couple of random heads laying about, myself and the bard started playing Faceball. Which again, this is very murder hobo-y story, but
right. Well,
heck, I was 19 at the time.
Yeah, we all had to start somewhere.
But and now I remembered what the other story was.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay. So again, this is back in college. Friend had written his own game, and we were helping him play test it. And uncharacteristically of myself, I was playing a mage. And this one spell that he had written up was called Dissolve Skeleton. So my character is like this little, basically like a blue halfling. So think, Papa Smurf. So I had tried, and we'd played like 4 or 5 sessions of this. I had tried to cast this spell, I don't know how many times. And every time the target had made it save.
Yeah.
So we're fleeing this city, we're on a ship, and there's this 50, 60-foot skeleton chasing us down the river and out the bay. I'm like, well, what the heck? Like, I don't have any good attack spells. I don't have anything else ranged. Oh, heck, I'll try it again. So I'm like, Doug, I cast Dissolve Skeleton. And so he makes his roll down there behind his screen, and he gets this look on his face, and he sat there for about 20 seconds, and I could see him doing something behind the screen with his hands. And he gets up, he walks down around the end of the table behind me with his hands kind of cupped together, right? And he comes up behind me and over my head and just opens his hands, and I get doused in this handful of confetti. Because the damn spell actually worked.
For once, yeah, exactly.
Right. I try to cast it on generic kobold number 3, it doesn't work. Cast it on big bad evil guy, and it works.
Yeah. Dissolve skeleton.
Which obviously, the table just, we thought that was hysterical.
Yeah, that's definitely one of those. The table erupts in absolute laughter. That's possibly a session ender.
I think it was.
That's one of those where you just got to have the discussion of, well, where do we go from here? Because I think that's one of those. What's one of those session enders? Definitely had those before, good and bad.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that's a tool that's a trick in the tool bag that I don't think we talk about very often. It's just a session ender. Like something happens so awesome, so like wild, so bizarre that you just go, yep, that's the session for today, no matter what length it actually is.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've definitely done that. Like, you try to, like, you can't do it like 10 minutes into the session, but if you're half hour into a 2-hour session and something absolutely wild like that happens, you just sort of go, we even want to play anymore? Because like nothing more exciting than that's going to happen.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That like maybe sometimes you just do that, but I think
you got to be careful. You can't do that all the time.
No, because then people start going, "Why did we show up?"
Yeah, but like you do it once in a while, and it's a pretty cool trick.
Yeah, well, and I think, like you said, though, a moment like that, it's like you said, you're not going to top it, and everyone's going to be thinking about it.
Right.
So, maybe you just chill out, play some board games, whatever.
Yeah. I think that point you just sort of go, I mean, I think the session's kind of over after that, and you have a conversation like, well, whatever you guys want to do, if you want to hang out here or whatever.
Yeah, but I mean, like comedy gaming. Let me go back up to the Patreon comment here, just to see if I can pull any more ideas out of it. Yeah, because like one of our listeners said, they had a friend that requested comedy and action, like they just had enough of intrigue and politics and all that, and just wanted fun action.
Well, yeah. I think back to when I was playing the Genesis Stars Without Numbers game before you came on. We had a player drop out, and that was interesting. Player sort of, there was some disagreement, and they left the group. And it's like, how do you write off that character? Well, when we had last seen them, they were in an elevator with me, and we basically land on a floor, and they're like, there's a bounty hunter looking for the other character. It's like, okay. I push them out and shut the door to the elevator and take off, right? Like, yeah, it's an unceremonious send off to that player's character, but it was just a silly, goofy moment that was like, oh, okay.
But that's kind of third person funny.
Yeah, it would be absolutely something I would do to an NPC too. Like, oh, they want you. Bye.
Well, okay. Something like that. Remember the time Chris Perkins guested on Critical Role?
Yeah.
And for those who haven't seen it, it was in campaign 2. Chris Perkins shows up. They introduce his character. He's there for about,
I don't know. It's all of like 10 minutes.
And this is from intro to Perkins walking off set.
Yeah.
Because there's some character interaction, and then his little goblin character, who I believe his name was like Splurt or something.
Yeah, I want to say it was was it Goblin? I thought it was Kobold.
Maybe one of the other.
I would say it was a kobold, because kobolds aren't supposed to live very long, and that was sort of part of the joke.
But yeah, he got hammered by a fire giant or something.
Yeah, he had like a bag with a beehive in it, and like tried to fight a fire giant and got myrtleated, and it was hilarious. That was a good episode.
Talking about them too, funny moments. The arguments that Percy and Grog had over Percy's glasses in campaign 1.
Oh, again, I go back to anytime Grog and Scanlan were in town together.
Yeah. I think my favorites were more the moments where Travis took Grog being not very bright and kind of played on the innocence of that. Not intentionally like doing dumb stuff, but basically played up on Grog doing something that Grog thought was smart, but that objectively really wasn't.
Right. Well, him with the deck of many things. And the immediate reaction from everyone else at the table of, take that off of him now. It was the short realization of what he had, and everybody, like, you could see it in Marisha's face when he like explaining, and she just like has this look of horror of like, get that off of him now.
But yeah, I don't know. I love playing in less serious games just for the what do you want to say? The interplay, the working off each other. And I like doing that in serious games too, but when you can do that in these moments that I like making people laugh too. So
yeah, I do too. I think one of the things though, and I'll say this, just something I'm missing is a long running campaign of something. Right? Like, we've switched to a lot of shorter, we'll say like a 10 session game or something like that, right? Like a short mid-length game. I think some of the, like, you can have a serious game with really funny moments comes from, well, yeah, we played this campaign for 3 years. You know what I mean? Like, some of that comes from, yeah, we've been gaming together for long enough now that we know each other's, like, we know what's going to get a laugh and how to do that. You know what I mean?
No, I think you hit on something there, though. I think comedy, as far as if it's a goal for a game, probably works best as a one-shot. But those comedic moments that happen in those long-running games that are setups and callbacks and stuff like that are just, oh, they're so good.
Yeah, they just feel different.
Mm-hmm.
It's so rewarding when you get that setup to a callback to, you get the setup like 3 weeks ago and now you're at the punchline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I feel like I'm running out of steam here and I feel bad about
Yeah.
it.
I don't know. I'm sure we'll come up with more stuff and you'll hear more funny stories in the future, but
So this was also something that that listener brought up was, how do you keep things funny and stay on track?
that's hard sometimes. I that's a you really have to. That's again that we become sort of our favorite phrase anymore is keep your bullet points loose. Be prepared to put them in another gun. It- you get into that silliness, and you got to be prepared to some of that you got to follow out. Some of that, if it's way too silly, you just depending on the dynamic, you probably just ignore it and lay out what the consequences for being too silly was, right?
Mm-hmm.
There was a moment that happened in RetroStar, and I can sort of talk about this comfortably, where there was a conversation had of, well, did you leave the crate? No, I didn't leave the crate. I took the crate with me.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody was like, no, you were supposed to. Oh,
Yeah, yeah. Well, that, and I should mention too, there was a point somewhere in that where I talked to you between sessions and kind of came up with this idea that Barnaby fully believed that Miss Tina needed the income from the activities of the Retro Star to survive.
right.
That, and my kind of idea was that no, she's just doing this as a thrill seeker. In reality, that's what you do, whether that would fit your plan or not. But that my character believed this was like serious business to her.
Right.
And to kind of have this, weird kind of undercurrent going where he took it a whole lot more seriously than everyone else.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
And I don't know how well that came through.
Well, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference in a story when you have a character that takes everything super seriously.
Mm-hmm. But that, in a way, that was an effort to be funny by not being funny.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know. Man, I love that game.
That was a lot of fun. I would like to explore that in something. And this is going to sound like I'm dissing on what you did, and I'm not trying to at all. I would love to explore that in something more set up and long form.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that could be really interesting if you were to do a longer form game of that and with more prep time. That was something that I just sort of I prepped it, but I just sort of rolled it out of the top of my head.
Yeah, well, and then what we had at one point, like 6 weeks off between sessions.
Yeah, and that sort of kills momentum.
And then like we had, well, what, this will be the episode coming out. The Rax episode will be out by the time this airs, right?
Who? What?
The Rax episode?
The Rax. Yeah, the Rax episode I think comes out next week. So yeah, it'll come out between.
Yeah, it'll be out by the time this airs. And so we just hammed it up with that.
Well, yeah, and that's when you started finally, I feel, hitting your stride when it comes to understanding the comedy of that game.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like people became more comfortable once you started just hamming it up.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that, much in the same way, I know I only played like one session of it, but much in the same way that Monster of the Week, we were really rough around that.
Well, I think
as far as getting used to how that narrative works,
mm-hmm.
I think the same thing happened with like RetroStar, and then you guys finally started coming into your own, and it was a good time. It was just not a long form game.
Yeah. No, and look, I mean, Monster of the Week, we played it very campy. I think that could also be played much more serious. But yeah, RetroStar, I think RetroStar is supposed to be at least third person funny, if not overtly funny.
Right. RetroStar is a really good game, though. Yeah, I really like it.
Yeah, but there again, it goes to we were all learning the system. At that point, you and I had played together. I had played with Slug, years ago.
I had played with Java when we played a little bit of Android.
Yeah, we'd played with, like we weren't unfamiliar with each other, but we weren't.
A group at that point.
Yeah, that was kind of us sort of solidifying into a group.
Yeah.
And that's another factor, right? Like as you get to know each other as players, that dynamic builds and you can, what's going to make that other person snicker, or if you leave this line hanging, they're going to pick it up and go somewhere with it.
Right.
Which I think is half the trick to a good comedy game.
I completely agree. Yeah. And I think with all that, I think we move into Game of the Week.
Woohoo! Game of the Week.
Game of the Week. Game of the Week.
So I have one, and
All right.
I don't know if you ever used this, but I'm using it.
Okay.
It's a game called Goblin Jug Band.
You have my attention, sir.
Actually, it came out 2 days ago on the 14th.
So no, I have not used it.
No, you have not. It's not a role-playing game about brave warriors or wise wizards. You aren't strapping on armor to go hunt a dragon or delve into dungeons. And you aren't going to be lauded as heroes by anyone who matters. It's a role-playing game about a goblin jug band. You wander the realm, go on tour, and have awesome adventures in a very strange world. Your weapons are music, your sheer tenacity, and the strange blend of cunning, cluelessness which comes with being a goblin. I look at this as the tabletop RPG version of Tenacious D in the Pick of Destiny.
You're probably not wrong. Oh gosh.
Yep.
And you know what would be really fun to do with this? Play this for a month or two.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're playing a big fantasy campaign,
yeah,
have the band be reoccurring.
Oh yeah. Oh, just have them be around.
Mm-hmm.
Or say you just wrapped up a really big campaign in your fantasy setting. This Goblin Jug Band is just gonna sort of follow after your adventures.
Oh, so I get where you're.
So you get to see the repercussions of your actions while simultaneously not being the characters that did those actions, right?
Okay, so here's to play on one of your ideas from the Split the Party episode. Do this as kind of a 2-layer campaign where you've got the main storyline and then you've got the Goblin Jug Band. Following
such a
them
good
around,
name, though.
Singing the songs of the story
of the party. Yeah,
yeah.
It's such a good name, though, too. Goblin Jug Band, because it's so evocative. You know exactly what that means.
Mm-hmm.
You know what that entails. Oh
wow! No, this.
Yeah.
And I love the end of it. By the way, this is a very serious game.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yep. I'm sure it is.
Oh wow! Oh gosh!
Yeah.
Damn it! I don't need more things to want to buy.
I know. And of all the things, this is $10, so it's not like it's too much.
Yep. POD options as well.
Yeah. And it's all self-contained.
Mm-hmm.
There's no, it's not like you have not like you have a game and you have to figure out the system for it. No, it's all there.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like 70 pages. So
yeah, but oh god,
75.
This would be perfect though for like even just drop in scenery break within the game.
Get a really tense combat going. You have to stop halfway through. You don't come back to that combat. You come back to Goblin Jug Band.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
you know that when you're like fighting the big bad at the end of the session,
mm-hmm.
and you gotta like, oh, I can't play anymore. We gotta stop here. Next week, Goblin Jug Band.
Mm-hmm.
I'm absolutely doing that to my players, just to annoy the crap out of them, just to be like. And now for the exciting conclusion of Goblin Jug Band. No.
But they'll remember it and they'll have a blast.
Exactly. They'll be like, Oh man, remember that time that you teased us with the conclusion of our campaign and we played Goblin Jug Band instead? Yeah.
Oh my, that is
Uh,
that is excellent.
Look, we tell you not to be mean to your players, but sometimes.
Well, sometimes they don't know the fun that they really want to have.
Exactly.
All right, so Goblin Jug Band. The game that I picked out isn't particularly a comedy game, but the genre has had more than its share of comedy done with it. And given what this design is based around and the fun that we've had with something in that design, my game of the week is a game called Frontier Scum. And what Frontier Scum is essentially a Morkborg acid western. So, I mean,
Okay, let me tell you what just popped into my head. Seth MacFarlane did a movie a while back called A Million Ways to Die in the West.
okay.
It was a comedy about just bad luck and dying in the Wild West, and that's immediately what came to my mind. It's like, oh man, that movie kind of sucked, but that would be a hilarious campaign of like just A Million Ways to Die in the West style unlucky campaigning.
Oh, but that actually, I mean, look, with the Morkborg cyborg aesthetic, that works so well.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Like,
The first Morgborg campaign I ever listened to was like 10 minutes. They rolled characters, they didn't even make it out of the room that they started in.
well, look at our cyborg game that we played, the one shot with
Yeah.
the grenade, and that's all I'll call it.
Yeah. Just
It was wonderful.
was great.
But yeah, so this is, like I said, it's called Frontier Scum. PDF's 990, 68 pages. Doesn't list it here as being related to Morkborg, but that's how I heard about it. So it's my understanding that it is effectively a, Morkborg inspired Western.
Yeah. Which
Um,
I am down. I'm down.
yeah, I've been having this weird urge to play something Westernish, but I have a lot of weird urges to play a lot of things, and so I don't always know what the hell I want to do.
Yeah. I have a story to tell you after the podcast, after we turn the robots off, because I just
Aha.
remembered something. But
Okay.
other than that, is there anything else you'd like to say for the people?
Can't think of anything other. Just have fun with it,
Yeah. Yeah. And as always, links to everything are in the show notes. Patreon, Discord, Facebook, Twitter. And with all that being said, we want to remind you to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter and RPGs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.